This election is so crucial. It requires us to get out of a comfort zone. It requires us to talk to our family members, our friends in the workplace, in the public. We need to share what we know, and we need to encourage people to understand what is at stake here. Our vote is not personal this year. We can't keep it to ourselves. If we do, and our country continues in this direction, then we have only to look in the mirror that we didn't take the opportunity and have the courage to speak out. Our final speaker is Christopher Finney, Esquire. I think that means he's a lawyer. He is lead counsel for a lawsuit. How many of you were at the Sinclair rally? Okay, you know what happened there. Well, you might also know that a lawsuit was filed, and he is the lead counsel on that, representing 3 individuals from that rally, when our First Amendment rights were violated by not allowing us to hold signs on the campus. So he's going to give us an update on that.
Thank you. A couple of preliminary things. First of all, I want to thank Ruth, Deddens, and Bonnie Burrell, and Brian, and everyone else, both for their activism, but also for organizing this. I want to thank you all for coming, because it's people like you that's going to make the difference. I have so much that I want to tell you in such a short period of time within which to do it. So let me just say a few things. First of all, are you aware there's an election in 17 days? Okay. Are you aware that Ohio's important in that election? Okay. And imagine, because down in Cincinnati we see it, that I think there's 4 rallies in Cincinnati just this morning to motivate people to get out and vote. Okay, and my guess is a lot of you have been to a lot of these rallies already. Why are all these people flying in from all over the country to reach you? The reason is you guys have already decided you all are going to vote, you're motivated. But standing right here today, right here, these 150 people who have assembled today, you probably have the power. If you go home and you get on the phone, and what Ruth just said, get out of your comfort zone, because the people that you go to church with and the people that you work with are a lot like you. So they're already voting the way you're voting. We've got to find those undecided voters, and we've got to find those other voters and convince them to vote the other way. There's enough power standing here right now to make the difference in this entire election. And every single one of us has to get on the phone constantly between now and Election Day and do what you can to make a difference in that area. So I wanted to just mention that. The second thing is, I am honored, not just in this case, but in many others, to defend the U.S. Constitution, and particularly the First Amendment. One of those notable cases is the Sinclair College case, where people who were holding signs like the ones that you all have were ordered by the police to put them on the ground, turn them upside down, and stand on top of them in order for their rally to proceed. And this is illustrative of the problem that we have as what, again, I'm privileged to do, is to be a constitutional attorney, is that the words in the Constitution don't mean anything if the people in government, including our judges, but also our elected officials and the bureaucrats, don't recognize it. Now, we have a problem in that, starting with 4th grade civics, there is a fundamental lack of respect today for these important constitutional liberties. And you're seeing that all the way up to the White House today, when we have to hold up a sign that says "Protect Religious Freedom." Well, that was enshrined in our Constitution over 200 years ago. And it should be obvious and it should be understood, but it's not. So what it comes down to in the Sinclair College case and in the case of the HHS mandate is one federal judge who's appointed for life who gets to make a decision in each of these cases. Do I enforce the Constitution as it's written, or do I ignore that for some other societal purpose that I want to advance? If you lose that fight, you then go before a 3-judge panel in the Court of Appeals. And for most cases, that's the end of the line, because less than 0.1% of the cases that are appealed to the U.S. Supreme Court are even accepted by them for decision. So the power of the Constitution first depends upon those elected officials and appointed bureaucrats just doing the right thing to begin with. If they choose not to do it, if they order you to put your signs on the ground and stand on them and refuse to let you hold them up in America, it falls to one federal judge who decides, is that a constitutional right or not? Isn't that frightening? I mean, this is how thin these rights that we have are. And then if he makes the wrong decision, it goes to a 3-judge panel, and it takes 2 of them to make the right decision. So 3 people, in the end, get to decide whether the Constitution means anything or not in most instances. And then in a few cases, it goes up to the Supreme Court, and you get 5 more people, as we saw with Obamacare, who, if they make the wrong decision, then that Constitution didn't mean anything. Do I have any teachers here in the audience? Do I have any people who teach? What do you teach? Science. Okay? It starts with the teachers in the schools. If the teachers in the schools don't teach those 4th graders, 5th graders, and 6th graders what the Constitution means and give them an understanding and appreciation, and if you as parents at home don't explain to your children why those rights were in the Constitution to begin with and what they mean, then those elected officials and those appointed officials are going to make the wrong decisions. And we're going to have judges who don't understand or are unwilling to apply the Constitution as written. And those 3 people, 1 federal judge and 2 appellate judges, can screw the whole thing up for us, and it's over. There is no Constitution anymore if they refuse to enforce it. So I have the great privilege as a significant part of my law practice to represent wonderful clients like Brian Kemper, who stands up, there you go, against abortion and for his constitutional rights to religion and free speech. Now to my prepared remarks. For people much younger than me, you may not remember this name. I see some young folks over here. And by the way, when Nicole spoke, where's Nicole? Where'd she go?
Right here.
Over here. I'm inspired because so few young people are really standing up for these important rights and liberties that we have, and you all, the world's going to belong to you very soon. And thank God that you're doing what you're doing. But it's amazing. But people as young as Nicole may not know the name Alexander Solzhenitsyn. Maybe you do. But he was a man who stood up to Stalin and served decades in the Gulag system and wrote a book called, Gulag Archipelago, that exposed that system, and actually, for the first time for the world, exposed to the world what was really going on in the old Soviet Union, and slowly and very quickly dismantled that system as a result. He eventually moved to America, and you would think, he would be inspired by the liberties and the values that we have, but he moved here, and he gave an important speech in 1978 to the Harvard College commencement. And there he said he had a bitter truth for his American audience, decrying what he referred to as rational humanism in American thought. And what he said was, unconsciously and unintentionally, that the American system was actually merging with the thought processes that they had in the Soviet Union and in China, that slowly, not very quickly there and slowly here, eroded these values, these freedoms that I talk about, that those 3 people, 1 federal judge and 2 appellate judges, can make meaningless if they don't enforce the laws. And that thought process is a thought process that makes man the center of it all, cutting ourselves off from our Christian heritage. And what Solzhenitsyn gave, and what I think is a profound quote, which was the practical autonomy of man from any higher force above him. And this is really the battle that we're all fighting. As the history of this great nation has shown, is let alone people will pursue religion and religious liberties. And when the Pilgrims came over here, and was enshrined in our Constitution, was this notion that we should be allowed to worship God and pursue our own destiny uninterfered by the government to do so. The founders knew that a virtuous and spiritual path for ourselves would come from that, and they enshrined that in the First Amendment. And the First Amendment's kind of a funny thing because we look at it as segregated rights: freedom of religion, freedom of expression, freedom to petition government, and so on, freedom of speech. But they're really together one right: the freedom of association, the freedom to think and speak and interact with other people in the way that we feel appropriate. Now, juxtaposed against that right that's recognized by the Constitution, we have the powers of government, which are really just two. When we really cut it down, or actually there are three. There are three great powers of government. One is the power to imprison you, to take your liberty away if they disagree with what you choose to do. Two is to seize your property, to take your money away if they disagree with what you do. And the third great power of government is to subsidize those things that they want to happen. And when you think about what Solzhenitsyn said, which is to fail to recognize this higher power, but instead look to ourselves as the center of the universe, that's really what the Obama administration is doing. And they're saying that the government, this empowerment of the individual above a higher force by government, is what they intend to advance, and they're doing it. And they're not doing it like Stalin and Mao did overnight and with the butt of a gun. At least not right now. What they're doing is very slowly, and they're using those three powers to slowly erode all of these liberties that we have. And those three powers are the power to imprison you, because you're going to soon see Catholic bishops being threatened with that if they don't provide abortion coverage. And you all were threatened with that at Sinclair College. If you don't do what we tell you to do, we're going to haul you away in handcuffs. And Brian has had that, the deprivation of liberty for praying. We're going to take away your property. We're going to fine you. And that's more what they do, okay? Because our society is materialistic, it's really important to be wealthy, right? And so we're going to make it so you can't be wealthy. We're going to take away your retirement. We're going to take away your health care. We're going to take away your ability to provide for your family if you don't adhere to our values. And by the way, once I gave a speech and I said this, that they're going to deprive us of our liberty, they're going to deprive us of our property if we don't do what we want them to do. And they said, well, that's absurd. That's not what government... That's exactly what government does. It's the only things that government can do, right? And the third thing is the power to subsidize. So they take our money and then they subsidize these things that are contrary to our values. And using those three powers, and unchecked by federal judges, there's really nothing left. That piece of paper, the Constitution, just becomes a piece of paper, and it means nothing at all. So this election is absolutely critical because we have a government, Kathleen Sebelius, and President Obama, and many, many others, who have consciously elected not just to disregard the Constitution, but to use those three powers: the power to tax, the power to seize property, the power to deprive you of liberty, and the power to subsidize. They've used those three powers. They've elected to use those three powers to take away more than 2 centuries of the values that this country stands for. And it all comes to a head 17 days from today, with Ohio being the center of that process. And we're going to continue to do what we do. We're going to go before federal judges, and there's many wonderful federal judges that are going to enforce the law. And we're going to do what we can using the power of the law, which is still very powerful in this country, to make a difference. But if things don't go well 17 days from today, America, because President Obama is going to appoint so many of those judges, is in a dire situation. So I ask you, by the way, there's a lawsuit that I'm involved with right now in which, this will humor some of you, frighten most of us, in which the Susan B. Anthony list, a pro-life group out of Washington, in the 2010 election accused our congressman down in Cincinnati, then Steve Driehaus, of voting to spend taxpayer money on abortion because he voted for Obamacare. He turned around and sued the Susan B. Anthony list for defamation and filed a complaint at the Ohio Elections Commission, which has criminal penalties associated with it for having uttered those words, having had the audacity to utter those words. And Dr. and others, does Obamacare provide taxpayer subsidy of abortion? It does. But right now, today, the federal judge who has that case, who, by the way, used to be the attorney for Planned Parenthood in Cincinnati, has allowed that lawsuit to go forward. And this, Susan B. Anthony must defend themselves against the allegation that simply uttering the words that Obamacare it causes taxpayer subsidy of abortion, that is defamatory, and that constituted a criminal offense under Ohio law. I want you all to think about that, and I want you to go home and get active and make sure we don't have presidents that appoint further judges who don't understand the Constitution. Thank you all very much.